Red dust curled around the old bones of Burnt Hollow like it was mourning the town, for buildings leaned in tired silence, warped by years of sun and wind. The church bell hung half-shattered in its steeple, its clapper long gone, so even the ghosts couldn't make a sound. Late afternoon light spilled sideways, painting the crooked main street in gold and rust. Nothing moved but the wind. Harlan Shaw stepped into it like a shadow returning home. His boots whispered across cracked earth, spurs barely jingling. A worn hat sat low over his brow, casting his lined face into shadow. But the cut of his jaw and the stillness of his gaze were unmistakable to anyone who remembered the stories. A shotgun rested across his back, quiet as death. Harlan hadn't fired it in 5 years. Not since he buried his name in the canyon north of El Paso. Now, he walked like a man looking for nothing and expecting less. But the town looked different, too quiet, even for a dead one. He felt it before he saw her. A tremble in the wind, like breath caught between sobs. He turned down the alley beside the old dry goods store, boots crunching on brittle weeds. There, half hidden behind a stack of collapsed crates, crouched a girl no older than 6 or 7. Barefoot, tangled hair, a burlap sack clutched in white-knuckled fingers. Her cheeks were streaked with dust and tears, and her little chest heaved like a trapped animal. She didn't bolt. She looked straight at him, chin trembling. "I ain't stealing," she said, voice hoarse. "Just hungry." Harlan didn't speak right away. He reached into his duster and pulled out the last piece of jerky wrapped in cloth. He crouched and held it out. No judgment, no questions. Her eyes darted between the food and his face. Then she snatched it, turned away, and tore into it like it was her first meal in days. She ate fast, hiding it with her body like she was used to having things taken. Harlan studied her, his breath shallow. Something about her shoulders, the way they curled inward, tugged at a part of him he'd buried deep. When she finished, she didn't run. She just sat there, small and shivering. A gust of wind stirred her hair, and she leaned closer to him like it was instinct. Then slowly, carefully, she rested against his leg and closed her eyes. He didn't move for a long time. That evening, Harlan carried her into the saloon, where the only soul left was Edna May, a half-mad widow with whiskey breath and a voice like gravel. She squinted at the girl, then waved them off. "Ain't got no room for strays, Harlan. World's full of orphans now." "She needs food," he said. "A bed. She needs a miracle," Edna muttered, vanishing into the shadows behind the bar. Harlan turned to leave. The girl stirred in his arms. Don't let me go," she whispered. He set her on a stool. "What's your name?" "Nellie," she said, barely audible. "Nellie," he repeated, as if testing the shape of it. She reached for his coat, gripping the hem with both hands. "Please, mister. They killed my mama. I ain't got nobody." He stared down at her, stiff as stone. Something flickered in his eyes. Not pity. Recognition. Pain like a knife, sliding through old scar tissue. "You got me now, kid," he said softly. Then he picked her up and carried her out into the rising wind. They made camp just outside town, beside the dry husk of a mesquite tree. Harlan started a fire with practiced ease. Nellie curled under his coat like she'd always belonged there, her tiny fingers clinging to the fabric. Her breathing slowed. Sleep came fast. But Harlan didn't sleep. The flames danced in his eyes, and he reached into his pack with shaking hands. He pulled out a thin leather wallet, unwrapped a string, and slid out a photograph so worn it was nearly tissue. The image was faded, just shadows of a woman and a child. The woman's smile was wide. The child's hair was braided, wild with wind. The firelight flickered, catching the burnt corner of the photo. He traced it with one calloused finger, his throat tight. Harlan Shaw had walked away from war, from blood, from the fire of vengeance that had nearly swallowed him whole. He'd buried his wife and daughter in the red clay of a nameless valley, and with them he'd buried Harlan Shaw. But now this little girl with hollow cheeks and the fire of survival in her eyes had stumbled into his path, and somehow, without asking, she'd opened a door he'd sworn shut. He looked at her again, watched her chest rise and fall. He saw the dirt on her skin, the raw scrapes on her feet, the way she held herself even in sleep. guarded, clenched. The world had already taken too much from her. Harlan knew what that did to a child, what it could turn them into. The wind howled across the desert like a wolf's cry. Somewhere thunder rumbled. Harlan reached for his shotgun and laid it across his knees. For the first time in 5 years, he checked the chambers. Loaded. The desert storm rolled in, carrying with it the weight of something inevitable. Harlan Shaw sat still as stone, eyes burning with memory, hand resting on the weapon that had once made devils flinch. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew something was. The air tasted like it. The silence pressed too tight, and nestled beneath his coat. A girl with no home, no name but Nellie, slept with the trust of someone who hadn't learned yet what the world could do. Harlan watched the horizon, and waited. By morning, the storm had rolled off into the mountains, but the air still smelled like gunpowder and secrets. Harlan stood by the well, watching the desert's edge. The girl, Nellie, clutched a worn blanket around her shoulders and stared into the coals of last night's fire. Neither spoke. Then, in the distance, dust rose again, this time not from wind. For riders broke the horizon, moving in tight formation, trailing grit like smoke behind a slow-burning fuse. Black hats, long coats, rifles slung easy, too easy. The kind of men who'd killed so often. They forgot what it meant to hesitate. Harlan didn't need to ask who they were. You could feel them before you saw them. The Cordray gang. Buzzards in boots. They rode straight through the broken town, arched like they owned it. Their leader rode front, Jed Cordray. Slick-back hair, silver tooth flashing in the sun, face carved from cruelty. Behind him trailed his younger brother Vince, twitchy-eyed Clay, and a long-limbed killer they called Preacher, who quoted scripture while he slit throats. They pulled their horses to a slow halt in front of the old general store, boots thudding to dirt, eyes scanning. Jed's gaze landed on Nellie. "Well, well," he drawled, spitting something dark. "Ain't this a surprise?" Nellie didn't move, but Harlan saw her body go still, like a bird spotting the hawk. Her small hand clutched his coat. Then her voice came, barely a whisper. "That's him." Harlan didn't speak, didn't blink. Jed looked right at him, squinted. "You lookin' to play hero, old-timer?" Jed grinned wide. "She's carryin' something that belongs to us." Harlan's fingers twitched by his side. "I don't know you," Jed said, "but I know that face. That's a killer's face. Or it was." Clay chuckled behind him. "You ain't got to look no more. Just dust and regret." Jed stepped forward, voice lower now. "Girl's a thief. Took something from a wagon we inherited. We just want what's ours. Don't need to end messy." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "What did you take from the wagon?" Jed's smile didn't falter. "That your business." "She hers." Jed's smile slipped. Harlan opened his satchel, the one Nellie had clutched like a lifeline. Inside, wrapped in burlap and innocence, was a metal strongbox. Dented, heavy, unmarked. Harlan turned it in his hands once. No keyhole on the top, but the weight told enough. Payroll. He looked at Nellie. Her wide eyes filled with something more than fear or shame. But she nodded. "My mama hid it," she said softly. "Said bad men was coming. She died trying to keep it safe." Jed took a step closer. "Give us the box," he said. "We'll be gone." Harlan stared at the strongbox, then back at the girl. Her wrists peeked from her sleeves, bruised, yellow and purple rings like shackles. She looked away fast, but not fast enough. His voice came quiet. "You laid hands on her." Jed shrugged. "She scratched me. We disciplined her." Something inside Harlan woke up. Slow, cold, old. He closed the satchel gently, tied the flap. Then he stood, shotgun resting easy on his shoulder. "She stays," he said. "And this box ain't yours." Jed chuckled, low and mean. "Ain't yours either." Harlan spat in the dust between them. The silence that followed felt like thunder rolling in from too far to hear. "She is now." Jed's eyes darkened. "You just bought yourself a short life, old man. I've been paying for a long one." The Cordray gang didn't attack, not yet. They weren't fools. They rode out not far, just enough to make camp on the edge of town and wait. Buzzards didn't need to chase what would die slow. That night, Burnt Hollow held its breath. Harland worked by lamplight, hands moving like clockwork. He poured broken glass into burlap, set it behind doors. He rigged the saloon entrance with empty barrels that'd fall loud. He dug a shallow ditch across the main road and filled it with boards and nails. None of it would stop a bullet, but it might buy him a breath. Nellie watched from the corner, silent. When he finally slumped by the fire, rubbing his wrists, she crept close. "Are you scared?" He didn't answer right away. Then always. "The trick's not showing it." She sat beside him, curled knees to chest. "You could leave," she said. "Give him the box. I wouldn't blame you." Harland looked at her then, really looked. Saw the flicker of a girl who'd lost everything, trying not to be a burden. Her voice was soft, but steady, like her mama had told her once how to be brave, and she never forgot. He reached out and touched her cheek with a hand that had once ended lives without trembling. Now it trembled. "I already ran once," he said. "Didn't save nobody." Tears welled in her eyes. "But what if you fall?" He smiled, and it cracked his face like stone splitting in heat. "I already did, long time ago." She crawled into his lap without asking. He wrapped the coat around her, felt her tiny heartbeat against his ribs. "You're why I'm standing again." Outside, the wind howled low through the timbers, whispering of what waited in the dark. But Harland didn't flinch. Not anymore. He had something to stand for now. And come morning, the Cordray gang would find out the hard way. The buzzards had circled too close. The sun cracked the horizon with a whisper of blood-red light, spilling across Burnt Hollow like it had forgotten the town was dead. The wind stirred softly, pushing grit through broken shutters and whistling low under warped saloon doors. Silence hung heavy, a silence so deep it felt sacred, like the desert was holding its breath. Harland stood alone in the middle of the street. His boots were planted firm in the dirt, shotgun across his chest, hat pulled low. He didn't blink, didn't shift, just waited, like the earth had grown him there. The Cordray gang came slow, riding like kings. Jed led the way, cocky and grinning, like this was sport. The other three fanned out behind him, laughing. Their coats flapped in the wind. Guns swung loose on their hips. They were killers, sure of themselves, sure of how this would end. Jed reined in just short of where Harland stood and slid down with a practiced ease. His silver tooth flashed in the dawn. "Didn't expect you to be the dramatic type, Shaw. Thought you'd die in a bottle, not a blaze." Harland said nothing. His eyes never left Jed's. "Look at you." Jed sneered. "Ghost of a legend. You think that little girl makes you a man again." Harland shifted the shotgun in his hands. The breeze stirred his duster. Behind him, somewhere out of sight, Nellie hid in the alley, her breath tucked behind the boards and her tiny fists balled tight. "You used to be Harland Shaw," Jed growled. Harland's voice came low, like thunder from deep in the mountains. "Still am. Just needed reminding." Jed reached for his gun. A sharp snap cracked through the air. Then chaos. Clay, moving to flank Harland, stepped onto a wire strung low across the saloon front. The release triggered a beam swung from above, hard and fast. It slammed into him like a hammer, knocking him sideways into the dust before he could draw. The air exploded with gunfire. Harland pivoted clean, smooth as old instinct. His first shot tore through Preacher's chest, folding the man like paper. The second found Vince as he turned to run, ripping him back off his feet. Nellie moved like smoke, barefoot, fast. She dashed from her hiding spot to the saloon steps and kicked loose a pile of glass bottles Harland had stacked the night before. They shattered across the street, catching Jed mid-stride. He stumbled, surprised, but not enough to stop him. He spun toward Harland, gun raised. Both men froze for a breath. Just a breath. Jed pulled the trigger too late. Harland's shot caught him square in the chest. Jed staggered, eyes wide, mouth twitching like he wanted to say something clever. Nothing came. His knees buckled, and he crumpled into the dirt with a soft thud. The wind picked up again, curling dust around the bodies. Then came the silence, the kind of silence that shifts a place, that rewrites what came before it. For a long time, there was no sound but the wind. Then a door creaked open. One by one, townsfolk began to emerge From behind curtains, from cellars, from dark corners of buildings they hadn't dared leave in years. Men, women, children. Their eyes locked on the man standing in the middle of the street, smoke still rising from his shotgun barrel. Harlan looked at them, then down at Nellie, who stood just a few steps behind him, breathing hard, cheeks flushed but unafraid. He didn't say a word, just nodded. That was enough. Later, as the sun climbed higher and the buzzards began to circle above the bodies, Harlan stood over Jed's corpse and said nothing. There was no triumph in his face, no joy. Just a weight lifted, slowly, like a stone pulled from deep water. They buried the dead by the fence line. No prayers, no markers, just dust. 3 days later, the town was quieter again, but it wasn't dead. Nellie sat behind Harlan on his old mare, legs not long enough for the stirrups, his coat wrapped around her like a blanket. On her head sat his hat, tilted sideways, far too big. She wore it like armor. They rode slow, eastward, where the land opened into wild fields and the sky felt wider than it should. She hummed a tune he didn't recognize, something soft and sweet, maybe something her mama used to sing. The sound of it made his throat tighten. He glanced back at her once. She was smiling. He smiled too, small and crooked, not because the world had changed, but because, for once, it felt like it could. They say a man dies twice, once when his heart stops, and once when his name's forgot. But in Burnt Hollow, they still talk about the old cowboy and the dusty little girl, about how he stood tall when no one else would, and how she gave him back his name.